We have to keep moving.
I'm scared.
Hold my hand. We're almost there.
There, in the trees.
What is that light? It's getting brighter. It's moving towards us.
Everyone, get inside.
Stay back! Don't you dare come closer!
Mom, please, we have to stick together. It's too dangerous. Go home now.
Won't leave you!
No! Get away! I have to keep going! This can't be real! I know you're out here somewhere. Show yourself!
We have to go. Now.
No. Running puts her at risk.
Staying is a death sentence.
I won't leave her.
To a slick, muddy path. Every step echoed against the old wooden bridge, a bridge that had seen more than its fair share of travelers. Nobody would have guessed that tonight, something unthinkable was about to happen here, a moment so shocking that it would change lives forever. And it all started with a family secret that nobody ever wanted to talk about. Emily had always been different from other children. Blind since birth, she had learned to navigate the world in her own quiet way, relying on her other senses. The gentle touch of her father's hand, the soft hum of the wind through the trees, the scent of flowers in the garden. She trusted the people around her, especially her stepmother, or so she thought. But sometimes appearances can be deceiving, and love can hide in the shadows of jealousy and anger. Her stepmother, Margaret, had never truly accepted Emily. From the moment Emily's father brought her into the house, there was tension, a subtle, simmering dislike that Emily could feel even without sight. Margaret's smiles never quite reached her eyes, and her words, though polite, often carried a hidden sting. Emily had learned to ignore it, to brush it off as grown-up frustration. But that night, something inside Margaret snapped. The story begins on that foggy evening when Margaret insisted on taking a walk with Emily near the old bridge at the edge of the forest. "Fresh air will do you good," she had said, her voice soft and sweet, masking the darkness that lingered beneath. Emily, trusting and unsuspecting, followed her stepmother, her cane tapping softly against the ground. The wind whispered through the trees, and the creek below the bridge gurgled like it was alive, adding a haunting rhythm to the night. No one could have predicted what would happen next. One moment, Emily was walking beside Margaret, feeling the rough wood under her feet and the cold metal of the railing against her fingertips. The next, a shove came out of nowhere. Emily stumbled, her heart racing, a scream caught in her throat as she realized she was falling over the edge. The world spun, the sound of rushing water grew louder, and for a moment, it felt like everything had stopped. But here's where the story takes a turn, because things didn't end the way anyone expected. Legends say that the forest has a way of protecting those who are pure of heart, and Emily, innocent and trusting, was no exception. Some say she vanished that night, leaving only whispers behind. Others claim she returned, changed, carrying with her a secret so powerful that even Margaret couldn't undo it. Margaret, terrified of what she had done, ran from the bridge, leaving Emily's cries behind. The guilt gnawed at her, but the fear was stronger. She swore no one would ever find out. Yet strange things began happening after that night, things that couldn't be explained by reason or logic. Objects would move on their own in the house. Footsteps echoed in empty rooms. And late at night, when the wind howled through the trees, a voice, soft and trembling, could be heard calling out, warning, watching. Emily's father never understood. He mourned, of course, believing the worst. But he had no idea of the strange forces that were awakening, no idea that the forest held its own justice. Neighbors whispered about the cursed bridge, about the girl who fell and somehow escaped, about the darkness that had entered Margaret's life. Even the animals seemed to sense it. Birds would scatter at her approach. Dogs would growl at her shadow. Every time she looked into the mirror, she swore she saw Emily's eyes staring back, even though she had supposedly disappeared. The story, though terrifying, is not just about fear. It's about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of cruelty. It's about how one seemingly small act, a shove, a moment of rage, can set off a chain of events that no one can predict. And it's about Emily, a girl who seemed powerless, but whose spirit would not be crushed. Something extraordinary awaited her, something that would shock anyone who heard the tale. Tonight, you will hear what happened next. You'll hear how the forest, the bridge, and Emily herself became part of a story that people still whisper about to this day. You'll wonder who was really in control and whether Margaret's guilt would ever be lifted. And most importantly, you'll find yourself asking, Could someone who appears weak, someone who is underestimated by the world, have the power to change everything? But before we get there, imagine the scene. A bridge in the middle of a storm, a girl teetering on the edge, the wind howling like it wants to pull her in, and the one person she trusted more than anyone else standing behind her. What would you do if you were Emily? And what if the forest itself had its own plan? One that would not let injustice go unpunished. This is a story rooted in folklore, in legends passed down over generations, of girls who fall and rise again, of justice that comes in ways no human mind can comprehend. It's a story that will make you question what's real and what's supernatural, a story that will grip you from the very first second and not let go. So hold on tight, because what happened next is beyond anything you could imagine, and the truth is far stranger than fiction. After that night, the house felt different. It wasn't just Margaret who changed. The walls themselves seemed heavier, as if they were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the shutters, reminded her of what she had done, or what she thought she had done. She kept replaying the moment over and over in her mind. Emily's small hands brushing against the railing, the sudden tilt, the gasp that didn't quite leave her throat. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see it again, frozen in time, and it made her skin crawl. But Emily wasn't gone, at least not entirely. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about a girl who had been seen near the riverbank days after the fall. They said she appeared at dawn, shrouded in mist, barefoot, with eyes that seemed to see far more than any blind girl should. Some claimed they heard her singing, a low, haunting melody that carried over the water and into the trees. And yet, no one dared approach her. There was something in the air around her, something both fragile and unshakably strong, that warned you to stay back. Her father, devastated and confused, searched the forest tirelessly. He called her name, listened for a reply, but there was only silence. Nights were the hardest for him. He would sit by the fire, staring into the flames, thinking of the little girl who had trusted him completely, who had loved her stepmother despite everything and now was gone, or so he believed. He had no idea that Emily's story was far from over. Margaret, on the other hand, couldn't escape it. She started noticing subtle things in the house. Small objects moving on their own, shadows stretching in impossible ways, whispers that seemed to follow her from room to room. At first, she tried to dismiss them, blaming her imagination, exhaustion, or even the stormy weather. But the events grew harder and harder to ignore. She would open a door to find a chair turned over, or hear footsteps in the hallway when she was alone. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she could swear she felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder. In the village, stories of the bridge began to spread like wildfire. People spoke of Emily with a mixture of fear and awe, calling her the girl who returned from the river and the spirit of the forest. Some said she was protected by unseen forces, spirits who watched over those who were pure and punished those who acted with cruelty. Children were warned not to wander near the bridge at night, and even the bravest of men hesitated to cross it after sunset. The forest, it seemed, had claimed a presence of its own, a presence tied to Emily that would not be ignored. Back at the house, Margaret's nightmares grew darker. Every night she would dream of the bridge, of Emily's hands reaching out to her, pleading or accusing. It was impossible to tell. The dreams felt real, as if the bridge itself had seeped into her mind. Sometimes she awoke to find scratches on the floorboards, or damp footprints that couldn't belong to anyone else. The guilt that had always lingered in the back of her mind became suffocating, as if the forest and Emily herself were closing in on her, waiting for something to happen. Meanwhile, Emily's senses, sharpened by necessity, had become almost supernatural. She could navigate the forest as easily as walking through her own home, feeling the vibrations of the earth, listening to the smallest rustle of leaves, smelling the faintest hint of someone's presence before they arrived. Every creature in the forest seemed to recognize her. Birds would land near her feet, deer would pause and watch her as if they understood her entirely. And in the deepest, darkest part of the woods, she had discovered something remarkable. A hidden grove, untouched by time, where the water ran clear and the air hummed with a strange energy. It was there that she felt safe and perhaps a little more powerful than she ever had before. But even in this sanctuary, Emily could sense the danger that lingered beyond the trees. Margaret's anger, her fear, her guilt, they were like shadows reaching into the forest trying to find her, to pull her back into the life she had been torn from. The girl knew she had to be careful. One misstep, one moment of carelessness and everything could unravel. And yet, deep inside, a strange curiosity stirred. She wanted to understand why the forest had saved her, why she had returned when so many expected her to be gone. She wanted to uncover the secrets that had been whispered for generations about the bridge and the forces that lived there. Meanwhile, the tension in the house continued to build. Margaret's interactions with her father became strained and uneasy. He could sense that something was wrong, though he didn't know exactly what. He noticed the way she flinched at certain sounds, the way she avoided certain rooms, and the way her eyes seemed haunted, as if she were carrying a weight too heavy to bear. The village gossip didn't help either. Whispers reached him about the cursed bridge, the girl who returned, the forest that watched. He wanted to believe it was all nonsense, but the unease in the air was undeniable. And so, the story hung in the balance. Emily, alive and more aware than ever, hiding in the forest with senses heightened beyond normal human limits. Margaret, consumed by guilt and fear, unable to escape the consequences of her actions. A father torn between disbelief and despair, and a village whispering about the supernatural forces at work. Every night, every shadow, every sound seemed to carry a warning. The bridge had not finished telling its story. As the wind howled and the trees swayed, it became clear that this was only the beginning. The forest was alive, Emily was changing, and Margaret's world was unraveling. And just when it seemed like the tension couldn't grow any stronger, a distant sound echoed from the direction of the bridge, a sound that neither Margaret nor her father could ignore. Something or someone was coming. The sound that echoed from the bridge wasn't loud, but it carried through the fog like a warning. Margaret froze in the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs, every instinct screaming that it was Emily. But how could it be? She had pushed her stepdaughter over the edge. She had seen her fall, or so she thought. And yet, there it was again, a soft, eerie tapping like someone walking carefully on the old wooden planks. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Emily paused. She could hear the same sound, faint but deliberate, carrying over the rustle of leaves and the trickle of the creek. She didn't know if it was human, or something else entirely, but her instincts told her to be cautious. She had learned long ago that not everything in the forest was friendly. Some things were drawn to the sorrow, the fear, the guilt of humans. And tonight, she sensed, Margaret's presence brought all of it to life. Back in the village, whispers of Emily's survival were growing louder. A few brave souls claimed to have seen her wandering near the outskirts, barefoot and silent, her white dress blending with the morning mist. Some said they glimpsed her helping lost animals, leading them to safety, as if she had become part of the forest itself. Others swore they saw her staring at the house, her expression unreadable, and that she seemed to know things no one had told her. The villagers began treating the bridge and the surrounding woods with an almost religious fear. No one crossed it alone at night. Mothers held their children tight. Even the village dogs refused to approach the creek. Inside the house, Margaret's paranoia was growing. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. Every little sound, the creak of a floorboard, a gust of wind rattling the shutters, felt like Emily coming closer. Her guilt became a living thing, whispering, clawing, reminding her that what she had done would not go unnoticed. She tried to distract herself with chores, with cleaning, with meaningless tasks, but nothing worked. And the more she tried to ignore it, the more the forest seemed to push back. Doors would slam shut, lights would flicker, and the shadows in the corners of the rooms seemed to lengthen unnaturally, reaching for her as if alive. Her father noticed the change. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden noises, and the way her hands shook when she thought no one was watching. He wanted to believe she was simply tired or stressed, but even he couldn't deny the tension in the house. Sometimes, late at night, he would hear her whispering to herself, muttering fragments of apologies or fears he couldn't understand. And in those moments, he began to wonder if the stories about the bridge and the forest might not be entirely false. Emily, hidden among the trees, watched them both. She had grown stronger, more confident, learning the rhythm of the forest and the ways of its unseen creatures. She could hear Margaret's thoughts sometimes, not in words, but in the vibration of fear and guilt that clung to her like a second skin. Emily didn't hate her stepmother, at least not entirely, but she understood that Margaret had made a choice. And choices, she had learned, always had consequences. There was another complication. A stranger had arrived in the village just after the incident. A man who claimed to be a wandering scholar, but who carried an air of curiosity that was almost predatory. He asked questions about the bridge, about the girl who had fallen, about the forest. Some villagers warned him to stay away, but he persisted. He seemed drawn to Emily's story, though he had never seen her. Margaret noticed his interest and felt an instinctive panic. If anyone discovered the truth, if anyone connected Emily's disappearance with the forest's strange power, she would be exposed. The stranger's arrival added another layer of tension, another thread pulling at the fragile web of secrecy Margaret had built around her life. In the forest, Emily sensed the stranger too, though she had not yet revealed herself. Something about him didn't feel entirely human. His curiosity was sharp, probing, almost unnatural. And though she was cautious, she also felt a strange pull of curiosity herself. Perhaps he could help her understand the forest, its power, and the reason she had survived. Or perhaps he would bring danger. Emily had learned long ago that the forest rewarded patience and punished recklessness. Back in the house, Margaret began to feel the forest creeping closer. Windows rattled even when the wind was calm. Footsteps seemed to echo from the walls themselves. She heard a faint whisper calling her name, soft and sorrowful, a voice that felt both real and unreal. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but she stayed, trapped in her guilt and fear, unable to act yet unable to rest. Each day she became more withdrawn, more desperate, more convinced that the forest, and Emily, were waiting for a reckoning. Meanwhile, Emily's own understanding of the situation deepened. She realized the forest was not just a safe place, but a living entity, aware of human intentions, aware of cruelty, aware of the imbalance that Margaret had introduced into her life. It whispered to her, guided her, strengthened her. And yet, Emily felt a growing sense of responsibility. She could remain hidden, invisible, untouchable. But there were questions she could not ignore, choices she would eventually have to make, and the moment of confrontation, when it came, would be inevitable. The night grew colder, the fog thicker, and the bridge loomed like a silent witness over the creek. Margaret paced the hallways, hearing the soft echoes again, feeling the pull of the past night's horror. The stranger moved closer to the house, asking questions that pierced through the fragile veil of normalcy. And in the forest, Emily paused, listening to every sound, weighing her next move, knowing that the threads of fate were tightening around her family and around the house she had once called home. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. But what, and who, would emerge from the shadows remained unknown. And in the tension that held the village, the forest, and the house in a fragile, dangerous balance, one thing was clear: the story was far from over. The fog thickened as night fell, wrapping the village and the forest in a heavy silence. It felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. Margaret stood by the window, staring into the darkness, her reflection trembling in the glass. She hadn't slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the bridge again, the groan of old wood, the rush of water, the sharp intake of breath that still echoed in her mind. She told herself it was over, that Emily was gone, that the forest was only playing tricks on her. But deep down she knew better. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it a sound that made her heart stop. It was faint, almost gentle, like the tap of a cane against wood. Pause. Margaret backed away from the window, her pulse racing. The sound wasn't coming from inside the house. It was coming from the direction of the bridge. In the forest, Emily stood perfectly still, listening. The night spoke to her in layers, the rustle of leaves, the low hum of insects, the distant creak. Beneath it all was something else, something familiar. The bridge was calling, pulling at her like a memory she could no longer ignore. The forest seemed restless too, its usual calm replaced by a quiet urgency. Emily felt it guiding her forward, urging her to move, though she didn't yet know why. The stranger had returned to the village just before sunset. He lingered near the edge of the woods, asking fewer questions now, watching more closely instead. His presence made people uneasy. He spoke softly, but his eyes missed nothing. He had learned enough to know that the stories were real, that the girl had not simply vanished. And tonight he could feel it too, a shift in the air, a sense that something long buried was about to rise. Emily moved through the forest with care, her steps light, her senses wide open. Every sound told a story. Every scent carried meaning. She could feel the fear radiating from the house, the guilt clinging to Margaret like smoke. But she also felt something else, something unexpected. Her father's sorrow. His confusion. His hope, faint but still alive. That feeling slowed her steps. Part of her wanted to stay hidden, to let the forest handle what came next. But another part, stronger now, knew she could not run forever. Back in the house, Margaret collapsed into a chair, pressing her hands over her ears. The whispers had started again. They weren't loud, but they were persistent, circling her thoughts, pulling her back to that night. "I didn't mean to," she murmured, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. The house seemed to respond, the walls creaking, the floor shifting beneath her feet. She felt trapped, as if the space around her was shrinking, forcing her to face what she had done. Her husband stood in the doorway, watching her silently. He had reached his limit. The tension, the strange events, the way the village looked at them, it was all too much. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "About that night." Margaret looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth hovered between them, heavy and dangerous, waiting to be spoken. At the edge of the forest, the stranger stepped onto the path leading to the bridge. The air felt charged, almost electric. He sensed that he was close now, closer than he had ever been to understanding the power hidden in the stories. He didn't know whether he was hunter or witness anymore, only that whatever happened next would change everything. Emily reached the clearing near the bridge and stopped. The old structure loomed before her, familiar and terrifying all at once. The wind swept across it, carrying the scent of water and moss, carrying memories she had tried to bury. She placed her foot on the first plank and listened. The bridge responded, groaning softly under her weight as if recognizing her. The forest fell silent, waiting. Margaret felt it at the same moment, a sharp pull in her chest, a certainty that she could no longer avoid. Without fully understanding why, she grabbed her coat and stumbled out of the house, drawn toward the bridge as if by an invisible thread. Her husband called after her, but she didn't stop. The fog swallowed her as she moved, the path lit only by the pale glow of the moon. From a distance, the stranger watched two figures moving toward the same place, unaware of each other yet bound by the same fate. He followed, careful not to be seen, his curiosity burning brighter with every step. On the bridge, Emily stood still, the wind tugging at her hair. She could hear footsteps approaching, unsteady, rushed, full of fear. She recognized them instantly. Her heart raced, not with panic, but with something far more dangerous, resolve. The forest seemed to lean in closer, the air thick with expectation. Margaret reached the bridge and froze. She sensed someone there before she saw them. The fog parted just enough for her to make out a familiar shape standing at the center of the bridge. Her breath caught in her throat. Every fear she had tried to bury came rushing back all at once. The wind howled, the bridge creaked, and the space between them felt charged with everything left unsaid. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Somewhere behind them, unseen eyes watched, and the forest waited to see what choice would be made next. Margaret's legs trembled as she stood at the edge of the bridge, the fog curling around her like something alive. She could barely breathe. The figure standing before her didn't move, didn't speak, but Margaret knew without needing to see clearly. She felt it deep in her bones. Emily was alive. Not a ghost. Not a trick of the forest. Alive. And that realization was far more terrifying than any haunting she had imagined. "Emily," Margaret whispered, her voice breaking as it drifted into the cold air. Saying the name out loud felt like tearing something open inside her. The bridge groaned beneath her weight, the sound echoing into the creek below, as if reminding her of what she had done, or tried to do. Emily stood still, her face calm but unreadable. She had imagined this moment many times, but now that it was here, it felt heavier than she expected. She could hear Margaret's fear tasted in the air. But she could also hear something else behind her, another set of footsteps, slower, cautious, filled with confusion and pain. Her heart tightened. Her father was coming. Hidden behind the trees, the stranger watched the scene unfold, his pulse quickening. This was no longer just a village legend or a folklore tale. This was real, unfolding in front of him, and the power surrounding the girl was undeniable. The forest bent subtly toward her, branches shifting, leaves rustling in patterns that felt intentional. He realized then that Emily was not just protected by the forest, she was connected to it. And that changed everything. Margaret took a shaky step forward. I thought you were gone," she said, tears streaking down her face. "I didn't mean for," her words dissolved into sobs. But Emily didn't move closer. She didn't step back either. She simply listened, absorbing every sound, every breath, every lie and truth tangled together in Margaret's voice. Then her father emerged from the fog. He froze when he saw them, his eyes wide, his heart pounding so loudly he thought it might drown out the world. "Emily?" he said, barely able to speak. The name carried hope, disbelief, and years of love all at once. Emily turned her head toward the sound of his voice. For the first time her calm cracked. Her chest tightened, and she felt the pull of the life she had lost, the home she had been torn from. The forest seemed to sense her struggle. The wind picked up, rushing through the trees, rattling the bridge as if urging her to remember who she was now, not just who she had been. Margaret backed away slowly, panic overtaking her guilt. This wasn't how she imagined it ending. The forest felt too close, the bridge too narrow, the truth too exposed. "This isn't possible," she muttered, shaking her head. You should have. She stopped herself, realizing what she was about to say, but it was too late. The words hung in the air like a confession. Her husband stared at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. The pieces finally fit together, the tension, the fear, the whispers, the way she avoided the bridge. What did you do? He asked, his voice low and unsteady. Before Margaret could answer, the forest responded. A sharp crack echoed as one of the bridge's old planks split beneath her feet. She screamed, grabbing the railing just in time. The bridge swayed violently, and the creek roared louder below, as if the land itself was reacting to the truth finally coming to the surface. The stranger stepped closer, unable to remain hidden any longer. Careful, he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. The forest doesn't forgive easily. His presence startled all of them. Emily stiffened. She hadn't sensed him this close before, and the realization sent a ripple of unease through her. The forest shifted again, branches bending toward him, warning him without words to stay where he was. Margaret clung to the railing, her knuckles white. You don't understand, she cried. Everything was falling apart. I was afraid. I didn't think. Emily took one step forward, the bridge creaking beneath her. The sound silenced everyone. Even the wind seemed to pause. She didn't speak, but her presence was powerful enough to stop Margaret's excuses mid-sentence. Emily could feel the forest's strength flowing through her, steady and unwavering, but she also felt the weight of choice pressing down on her shoulders. The forest could act on its own, but it was waiting for her. Her father reached out, stopping just short of touching her. Come home, he said softly. Please. The word home echoed in Emily's mind, clashing with everything she had learned since the night she fell. The forest hummed beneath her feet, the bridge trembling as if balanced between two worlds. Behind her, the stranger watched closely, realizing that whatever decision Emily made would not only shape this family's fate, but the fate of the forest itself. Margaret's grip began to slip. She cried out, fear overtaking her completely as the bridge swayed again. Emily felt the moment stretch, thin and fragile, like it could snap at any second. The fog thickened, the creek roared, and the forest leaned in, waiting. Everything had led to this point. The truth was exposed, the past colliding with the present, and the next choice, whatever it would be, would change all of their lives forever. But as the bridge creaked louder and the tension reached its breaking point, no one yet knew who would fall, and who would rise. The bridge groaned again, louder this time, and Margaret screamed as her foot slipped on the wet plank. For a brief moment, everything moved at once. Emily stepped forward without thinking, her instincts sharper than fear, her hand shooting out to grab the edge of Margaret's sleeve. The fabric tore slightly, but it held. The forest exhaled in a long, rushing breath, the wind whipping around them as if testing Emily's resolve. Hold on, Emily said, her voice steady but strained. It was the first time she had spoken since stepping onto the bridge, and the sound of it cut through the chaos. Margaret froze, hanging between falling and standing, her life balanced on that single grip. Tears streamed down her face, not just from fear, but from the weight of everything she had tried to bury. Emily's father rushed forward, anchoring himself to the railing and reaching for Margaret's other arm. Together, slowly, carefully, they pulled her back onto the bridge. When Margaret collapsed onto the wooden planks, sobbing and shaking, the bridge settled, the creek below calming as if satisfied, for now. The truth came spilling out then, unstoppable. Margaret confessed everything. The jealousy she had hidden. The anger that had grown every time Emily's presence reminded her of a past she couldn't control. The moment on the bridge when fear turned into action, and action into regret. Her words were raw, broken, and painfully honest. There was no denying it anymore. The village stories, the whispers, the forest's unrest, it all made sense. Emily listened in silence. She felt no triumph, no relief, only a deep, aching understanding. She had survived the fall not to disappear but to face this moment. To choose what came next. The forest hummed softly beneath her feet, no longer restless but watchful. Her father knelt beside Margaret, his face pale. We'll face this, he said quietly, though his voice trembled. All of it. There was no anger in his tone, only exhaustion and sorrow. The conflict that had torn their family apart was finally out in the open, stripped of lies. The stranger stepped closer, his curiosity now tempered with something like respect. The forest didn't save her by accident, he said softly. It was waiting to see what she would become. Emily turned her head toward him, sensing no threat now, only truth. She understood then that the forest had never wanted revenge. It wanted balance. As dawn began to break, the fog slowly lifted. The bridge stood quiet, worn but unbroken. Villagers gathered at a distance, drawn by the tension that had filled the night. They watched as Emily stood at the center of it all, not weak, not helpless, but calm and grounded. Emily made her choice. She stepped away from the forest's pull and toward her father. "I'm coming home," she said. The forest stirred, not in protest but in acceptance. Leaves rustled gently, birds called out as the first light touched the trees. The bond was still there, but it no longer needed to hold her. Margaret was taken away that morning to face what she had done. There were consequences, real and unavoidable. The village would never look at her the same way again. But the curse they feared, the punishment they expected, never came. The forest remained still. The bridge remained standing. Life slowly returned to the village, though the story never faded. Emily adjusted to being home again, changed but not lost. She moved through the world with quiet confidence, her senses still sharp, her connection to the forest lingering like a secret heartbeat. People noticed how animals followed her, how the air seemed lighter when she passed. Just when it seemed the story had settled, the final twist revealed itself. One evening, as Emily walked alone near the edge of the forest, she paused. The ground beneath her feet vibrated softly, familiar and warm. She smiled. The forest hadn't let her go completely. It never would. Far away, the stranger wrote the last lines in his journal, realizing the truth too late. Emily had not been saved by the forest. She had been chosen by it. And someday, when the balance was threatened again, the forest would call her back, not as a victim but as its guardian. The bridge creaked softly in the distance, not as a warning this time but as a reminder. Some stories don't end. They wait. In the weeks that followed, the village slowly found its rhythm again. The fear that once clung to the bridge and the forest began to loosen its grip, replaced by quiet respect. People still spoke of that night, but not in panicked whispers anymore. They spoke thoughtfully, as if trying to understand what it all meant. The bridge was no longer seen as cursed, but as a place where truth had finally been forced into the open. Emily returned home with her father, and though the house looked the same, it felt different. Lighter. The silence that once pressed down on the walls was gone. Her father moved more gently now, as if afraid to break the fragile peace, but Emily reassured him with small smiles and steady steps. She didn't need to see his face to know how deeply he loved her. She felt it in every word, every careful movement, every moment he paused just to listen. Margaret was gone from the house, and her absence left complicated emotions behind. There was pain, anger, and confusion, but also relief. Emily didn't celebrate what had happened to her stepmother. Instead, she accepted it as part of the story's weight. Some nights, she still thought about that moment on the bridge, about how close everything had come to ending very differently. Those thoughts stayed with her, not as fear, but as reminders of how fragile choices could be. The stranger left the village quietly, just as he had arrived. He never said goodbye, but he left behind his journal with the village elder. In its pages were careful notes, not about power or legends, but about responsibility, balance, and restraint. He had come searching for answers and left understanding that some truths were not meant to be used, only respected. The villagers kept the journal safe, treating it like a record rather than a warning. Emily's connection to the forest never fully faded. She still walked its edge in the evenings, listening to the wind move through the trees, sensing the life beneath her feet. The forest no longer pulled at her, no longer demanded anything. Instead, it felt like an old friend, present but patient. Animals remained unafraid of her. Birds lingered. Even the creek near the bridge sounded calmer, as if it too had found peace. The villagers noticed changes in Emily as time passed. She carried herself with quiet confidence, no longer hesitant or unsure. Though she was still blind, she moved through the world with an awareness that surprised people. She helped others when she could, guided lost travelers, comforted children afraid of the forest stories. Slowly, she became a symbol, not of fear or mystery but of resilience. Her father often sat with her at night, listening as she spoke about the forest, the bridge, and the night everything changed. He never rushed her, never questioned her feelings. Through those conversations they healed together. The guilt he carried for not seeing the truth sooner softened, replaced by gratitude that he had not lost her forever. As seasons passed, the bridge remained standing. People crossed it again, cautiously at first, then normally. Children laughed as they ran across it during the day. No strange sounds followed them. No shadows lingered. The bridge had done its part, and now it simply existed, old and weathered like any other piece of the village. Emily understood the final truth slowly over time. The forest had not saved her to punish anyone. It had saved her so she could choose differently. so she could break a cycle that might have repeated itself. That realization stayed with her, shaping the way she lived, the way she trusted, and the way she forgave. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Emily stood near the forest's edge and listened. The wind moved gently, leaves rustling in a familiar rhythm. She smiled, feeling a quiet sense of closure. Her story was no longer about being pushed, falling, or surviving. It was about standing, choosing, and moving forward. And so the folklore of the village changed. It was no longer just a tale of betrayal and fear, but a story about truth rising, about consequences faced, and about strength found in the most unexpected places. People still told it around fires and in hushed voices, but now they ended it differently. They said the blind girl didn't become a ghost or a legend of revenge. She became something far more powerful. She became proof that even the darkest moments can lead to understanding, and that sometimes what happens next isn't shock or fear, but healing.